here with Misfit Ministry, continuing our journey through the Bible, and we are finally getting to the Book of Ruth. Ruth is actually a Gentile woman. She is not an Israelite, chosen one of God, so non-Jewish. And providence, God's providence is one of the main themes in this book, meaning that God is always working good for those who love him and is always working in general for his plan. He is in the details of all things. We're also going to see conversion in this story, many things changing from one thing to the next, which God is great at. As well as we're going to see redemption in many ways. But again, I'm doing a quick intro. That's not what I want to do. But one more quick thing. Most scholars believe that this happened somewhere around Judges 10. So the story's happening, not chronologically. We're just getting here's also what happened during Judges, just its own story. So right away, because we see the book opens up with, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine. Now, there's multiple reasons why a famine would come. Two of the main reasons would be weather-related, natural occurrences why there's a famine. Just there's no rain, so there's a drought, and so just things aren't growing, things aren't happening. Another reason would be war. So somebody comes in and burns your whole city down and your crops and takes things, and so there's a lot of excuses for famine back then. And I think one cool thing to note about why Ruth is set apart, maybe wasn't even part of Judges, is because we get to see Judges was pretty grim. Okay, it was the people of God rebelling against God, and God just letting things and even pouring out his wrath, letting things happen bad. Curses, right? He warned them a long time ago, blessings and cursings. Obey me, this happens, disobey me, and this happens. But even in the midst of all the turmoil of God's chosen people, we get this story of God working good things still. And so it's a good, I think, life application for us that even when things seem a little grim in our lives, whether it's our fault or not, that God is still working good. So be patient. And so it starts with, there's a man sojourning with his family, and they're leaving, they're Israelites. They're leaving their place, Bethlehem, which literally means house of bread, and there's a famine, so it's ironic. But they're disobeying and leaving the land to go find somewhere else to live. And this man's name is Elimelech, and that literally means God is my king, and he is acting contrary to that. And his wife's name's Naomi, and her name means pleasant. And the sons, basically, the meaning of their names is sickly and weeping, so we'll leave it at that. So they're leaving their God-ordained land. And now all of a sudden, Naomi hears that, we don't know how much time has passed, but Naomi hears that God is providing for people, his people, that are in famine, in the famine land, but God's providing. Now all of a sudden she's becoming, religious and aware of God. So at this point you should see that the affliction of Naomi's life is causing her to notice God again. I mean, think about it. So the husband's disobeying, the family's going along with it. They die, and it's her all by herself with these new women in her life. And we see as the verses go on, Naomi's talking about God a lot all of a sudden. So Naomi wants to go back to the land, go back to her people, go back to God. Okay, it's a beautiful picture of repentance if you think about it. They went to a sinful nation, and the literal meaning of repent is to turn and walk the other direction. They're going back to God's land. And just in case you're in a season right now, I'm going to add a little encouragement that I don't care if you've walked 1,000,000 steps away from God, it only takes one step to turn around and walk back to him. So she's going to go back to the Israelite nation, to their land, and she tells these two Moabite women, Gentile women, that you need to go back to your parents, try and get married in your own land, and bless you and have a wonderful life, because coming back to where I'm from is not going to work out for you. You're women, you're widowed, and you're a Gentile, and actually from an incestuous nation. That's how your nation got birthed. And so my people are not going to look kindly on you. And of course they're weeping and crying about it, because I'm sure they've developed some kind of relationship and it's comfortable. And Naomi's like, I can't first of all, I'm too old to be married, and you're not going to wait for me to have kids so that they grow up and that you may marry them. And that may sound weird, but if we go back to old law, that's what happened. The younger brothers would marry the widowed women back in the day. And so now Naomi's just pointing out that's not really possible here. So she sends one daughter-in-law on the way, but Ruth refuses to leave and says, wherever you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Where you die, I will die. She's committing herself to Naomi. And so Ruth and Naomi get back to Bethlehem. They're excited to see them. And Naomi says, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Mara, which means bitterness, for God has dealt harshly with me. She's blaming God for her hardships. So Ruth and Naomi journey on to Bethlehem, back to where Naomi's from, and they arrive just in time for the barley festival. All right, so open up your Bibles and please read this stuff for yourself. I'm just highlighting things and hopefully making things more clear. But the whole part about the gleaning that Ruth is going to do in a field of Boaz, gleaning was this like welfare system they had back in the day. So basically, as your land and your crops and stuff, you would harvest, but you would purposely leave some behind for people in need, for people to come and do the work. So this wasn't a free handout, it was really hard work. But you would leave some behind to be able to take care of other people. What a beautiful thing God had laid out from, if you've been following along, it's from from the law. I can't remember what book, Leviticus, Numbers, one of them. And so basically what this broke down to was about 25% of the crops. That's a lot to leave behind. But again, that's you're trusting in God, saying, I trust that you're still going to provide for my needs as well. And so when Boaz enters the picture, we get a idea of who this man is right off the bat. He goes to meet his reapers or workers out in the field, and they bless each other. May the Lord bless you. And this goes back and forth. I mean, what a beautiful picture. What a great place to work, right? And so Boaz sees Ruth out there gleaning and asks one of his reapers, workers, who is that? And he says, oh, that's a woman that came from the Moabite land with Naomi. And Naomi and Boaz are relatives. And so Boaz approaches Ruth and tells her to don't glean anywhere else. You can stay here and glean all you want, and instructs all of his male workers to leave her alone. Don't touch her, basically, under his protection, which is really cool. And Ruth, of course, completely thankful and appreciative, bows to him and says, why are you doing this? Why are you finding favor for me? And Boaz responds, I've heard of you. I've heard of what you've done. I heard how you lost your husband and you committed yourself to Naomi in the way that you did. And he's basically giving her a Lord's blessing. And he also heard of her conversion. Ruth told Naomi, where you go, I will go. Your God will be my God. Now she's under the protection of Yahweh. So then Boaz invites Ruth to feast with him and his reapers, his workers, and they say they ate until they were satisfied. Boaz then gives further commands to his workers: do not mess with her, do not touch her, and let her glean as much as she wants to glean, and purposely leave behind some grain for her to take. So Ruth goes back, it says at the end of the day, Ruth goes back and shows Naomi what she has collected, and it's like a 2-week salary, like an average, what you would make in 2 weeks in one day. And so Naomi, of course, is like, where did you do? What did you, how'd you get all this? And she explains that I met a man named Boaz and yada yada. And so Naomi's super excited because it's their relatives, one, and she knows that, God bless this good man that is my family. And she's kind of playing matchmaker here too. Ruth was married to Naomi's son, and he dies, and now she just knows that, this could potentially be a redeemer for Ruth, meaning you take the widow and redeem her. You marry her and you bring her back to fulfillment, basically. So Naomi, kind of playing matchmaker here, tells Ruth to go back and only go back to Boaz's field and continue to just be part of that fabric, meet with the other women that are gathering crops, and, just keep going back there. And so I hope you're seeing the point so far. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but the providence of God, God using, Ruth could have went and gleaned, right, gathered crops at any field, at any man's land, and yet it was Boaz and you can see God's hand in all this. And it's, from Romans 8, I can't remember where it's at, but God is always working good for those who love him. And Ruth is under the protection, under the mighty wings of God. And so, the story's just going to continue unfold. And what we're going to get to by the end of the story is the beginning genealogy of David's line, where Jesus is going to come from. So chapter 3 opens up with Naomi telling Ruth, it's my job to take care of you as your mother-in-law, and she's now going to give her advice. Basically saying, you need to go to Boaz. Naomi tells Ruth, you need to meet Boaz at the threshing floor. Now, the threshing floor is interesting. It was this place, usually on a hill, where it would be breezy in the afternoon, and you would take up the wheat that you've harvested, and you would basically either throw it in the air or wave it. But Naomi tells Ruth to fix herself up, to wash yourself, make yourself look good, and go meet Boaz there. And so Naomi tells her to not, this is funny and good advice, I guess, don't make yourself known to him until he is done eating and drinking. So when he feels good, he's satisfied, and he's just, relaxing. And then it gets a little weird and foreign to us. Naomi tells Ruth to, once he's done, satisfied, and he goes to lay down, go lay down next to him, but you uncover his feet and you lay down by his feet. And this was a sign of submission and respect. And Ruth tells Naomi, everything you have told me, I will do. And so Ruth goes, he lays down, uncovers his feet. It startles Boaz, rightly so. And whoa, who's this laying at my feet? So then Ruth says, it is your servant, Ruth. And Boaz rightly asks, what are you doing? And Ruth asks, basically, and this is technically a proposal. She's proposing to Boaz saying, I want you to take me under your wing, be my protector, be my provider, basically redeem me. And so Boaz covers her with part of his blanket or robe, and that's the sign of him accepting the offer. What's cool about this imagery of being covered by the safety of his wings is we get a lot of that imagery from God. God, we are safe in the shelter of his wings idea. And the gathered church and the universal church, we are the bride of Christ. And so this is all just very beautiful poetic imagery. And so what's really cool is what's actually going on here is Ruth is imposing a Levite tradition we find in Deuteronomy about if a man dies and has a wife, that wife is to marry the brother or the next of kin. And Boaz is a kinsman as far as Naomi's relative, and Ruth is the mother or the daughter-in-law of Naomi, so this is technically a kinsman. And Boaz in all this responds wonderfully, and he says, you have treated me kindly and you have shown me great blessing as far as you didn't go after my young workers, you came after me. He's the older gentleman in charge. And he says, you are a virtuous woman. But Boaz, being a stand upright dude, says, you actually have a relative that is closer than I. So let's ask him first if he would like to be a redeemer before me. This is Boaz simply just abiding by the law of the land that was given to them. And so as weird in our culture today as that seems, the whole Ruth laying at the foot at his feet all night long, it was very culturally normal back then. Nothing weird happened. There was no outside of marriage interactions going on. However, Boaz, being a smart man, says, this could be looked at wrong. This could be interpreted wrong. And so he gives Ruth further instruction. He gives her some wheat to carry home with her, like as if she just came early to get some stuff. So, Boaz is just protecting both their honor. And this all happened so early that Ruth actually leaves to go back to Naomi, and Naomi is just waking up and is surprised to see her already out and about. So Ruth tells Naomi all the things that have happened, and of course Naomi is excited. And so this other relative of Ruth's and Naomi's doesn't want to redeem Ruth, and so now Naomi tells Ruth to simply wait. And this is a beautiful picture of the church and Christ. He says, basically, Naomi tells Ruth, there's nothing more for you to do. You can't add anything to what you've already done. You must just wait now for your Redeemer to finish what he's got to finish. He's got stuff on his end to do before he comes and redeems you. Be still and wait for your Redeemer to come. I love that. Pictures of Christ throughout the Old Testament. So Boaz now goes to the gate of the city. And the gate of the city back in the day, the cities back there were fortified. Okay, walls really high all around the city to protect them from, the unwanted. And the gate was actually a room, okay, like a building. And you had to go through there before you could get into the city. And in that room were the 10 elders of the town. There was important people there, the news of what's going on there. I mean, it was really like the hub of the city. So Boaz is going to this gate, this room, to petition the next of kin for Ruth and Naomi in this land situation we got going on. Ruth, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go to my video for Ruth chapter 3, just a few videos down. And Boaz obeying the law in Deuteronomy of if a brother dies, then the other brother marries basically redeems the wife to have more children in their name, to keep the family line going, all this stuff. And so Boaz isn't the closest relative to Naomi, so he's going to the closest relative. So Boaz is here because this is also where legal transactions go, whether you have a complaint about somebody or whatever, and so you do it in front of witnesses, and this is what's happening here. Okay, so Boaz talks to the next of kin and says, there's this land that can be redeemed by you. You're the next one in line. And he says, yes, I will redeem it. And then Boaz tells him, okay, but with this land, you're redeeming it from Naomi, but also from Ruth, and Ruth comes with the land, basically. You need to redeem her as well. Keep the family line going. And this next of kin is like, never mind, I don't want to. But Boaz was strategic in that to show that he really is, the other guy doesn't want anything to do with this situation. And so now it is fully and wholly Boaz's land, and Ruth is his. And I don't want you to miss it when Boaz tells, remember, not just this next of kin, but there's a whole group of men here as witnesses, a Moabite woman. Moabite was a dirty word, basically. These people were, less than anything anybody wanted anything to do with, because they were a cursed people of God back in the day. And so, this, I'm sure when he said a Moabite woman, probably little gasps going on. These are all Hebrew men that are in this room with him. And so this other guy, next of kin guy, he probably had another family. He had kids, all this stuff. And so there's a lot of reasons he's not a bad guy for not wanting to redeem this. He's just like, this isn't going to work. I've got my own stuff going on. I can't be part of all this. And so now under witnesses, it's free and clear for Boaz to be the redeemer. So like I always say, make sure you're opening up the Bible, reading this stuff for yourself. I'm just highlighting it and from memory, and so forgive me if I mess things up. I just want you to grasp what's going on, so when you read it, it's more exciting and more understandable. And so when we read about the taking off the sandal, a man takes off the sandal after all this and hands it to the other guy, that isn't just random and weird. Remember, everything in the Bible is on purpose. And so we find back in Deuteronomy, the original law was, now we are quite a few generations, like 6 generations from when this law was given in Deuteronomy, but I forget where it's at, chapter 24 or something. The law was, if a brother dies and is married, and again, remember the law is for the other brother to take this woman as a wife, the widow. If they refuse, then the woman is going to go to the gate, to this room with the elders and the witnesses, and tell them what's going on. This man now needs to be brought in front of them, and he's not forced to take this woman on as a wife or anything. However, it is his obligation and his duty, and so there has to be some form of punishment. And so to basically a little shame to the situation, he gets slapped with a sandal and spit on. Few generations now, obviously the spitting is done, but there's still a sandal situation going on that is, somewhat dishonoring. Okay, so now Ruth is going to be able to be Boaz's, and that's the whole point of this. Don't miss this. Boaz is a rich man. We've already discovered this. He's rich, has all the land he needs. He doesn't need any more land. He doesn't want any more land. He's buying this land to get Ruth. Okay, he wants this woman. And That's the beautiful romantic part of the story. And so do you remember the parable that Jesus tells of a man finds a hidden treasure in a field? And so he's not just going to go steal the treasure. He's not going to do anything dishonorable or secret like that. And so what does he do? He goes to the owner of the land and buys the whole lot of land. Why? He doesn't need the land. He didn't care less about the land. He probably left it alone once after he discarded it after he got this treasure, I'm sure. He bought the land so he could get this treasure. And so it's kind of this picture of Christ where, we are what Christ wants. He doesn't want our stuff. He doesn't want all these things we think we're bringing to him or doing for him. No, he just wants us. We are his Gentile bride. And so Boaz lays it all out to these witnesses, to the elders, saying exactly what he wants. He's going to marry Ruth and redeem this whole situation. And the elders stand and bless him and bless this whole situation. And yeah, it's actually kind of cool. And they bless him to have many children. And so they get married, they have a kid, and Naomi is, part of the situation still in the family. And it's just this beautiful picture of family being redeemed. And it is functional and beautiful under Christ. Well, not yet Christ, but you know what I mean. And then the chapter ends with genealogy. And I know I've touched on genealogy before, and they always seem very monotonous and pointless. However, one, it just shows the historical accuracy that the Bible is a historical book. And part of the main prophecies of Christ coming is his genealogy. And so what we're getting now is we get the genealogy from Egypt all the way into David. David is a direct descendant of Jesus Christ. And so just beautiful stuff, man. The Bible's awesome, and I can't wait to get to our next book. Love you guys.